Hi, and thanks for logging on to the Daily DVAR Halacha. And here's a brand new halacha for you, and it's for Wednesday, the 12th day of August. Here we go. For the next short while, we're going to do a couple of halachas about creating an ohel, a tent on Shabbos. That's kind of like building, and you're not allowed to create a tent covering on Shabbos. But let's look at the applications. You'll see where it's allowed and where it's not allowed. When you put a tablecloth over a table, maybe that's considered like making a tent, huh? Because you just drape it over, and it even goes down on the sides, and it creates walls and everything. So that's not a problem at all on Shabbos. I'll tell you why. It's because it's only considered a tent if the tent has a area underneath it that it's tenting over, if you know what I mean. And that tenting over has to be at least a tefach. That's this much, basically 4 inches, about a hand and a thumb. So that's not going to happen when you put a tablecloth over a table, because there is no airspace between the tablecloth and the table, so you haven't created a tent, and therefore it's okay. You see it sometimes on Simchas Torah or other situations where they hold a talis over a bunch of people. You might say, hey, that's a tent that they're creating on Shabbos or Yom Tov. I thought you're not allowed to create a tent. It is permissible in that fashion because people are holding up the talis. So we don't call it a tent if people are holding it. We only call it a tent if it's a building structure or something like that. But when people are holding it, it's considered very like not building-ish, and therefore people holding up a talis over you is not considered a problem. If your kids are old enough to have this explained to them, then you might want to explain to them that when they play house and they drape like a blanket over 2 chairs and they create a little tent area in there. Now, if they're 2 years old and they don't know how to be told otherwise, then okay, you don't have to tell them. But if they're old enough to understand this, and you could do chinuch and educate them on this matter, then yeah, then you shouldn't have them do that. That is like creating a tent on Shabbos. If you want to put a tarp over your sukkah, then if the tarp is like directly on the sukkah schach, then again, it's not going to be called a tent, and it won't be a problem because there's no tefach of airspace between the tarp and the sukkah. If there is airspace of tefach or more, that's 4 inches or more, then as long as some of the tarp was already rolled out onto the above area of the sukkah, then it is going to be considered fine because the tent was already there, at least one 4-inch spot of it was, and then you're just rolling out the rest. That would be considered okay. It's going to sound interesting to you, but if you carry a box over to a certain spot, and then you carry over a cover to put on that box so that it now becomes a seat or something, so you just created a tent because that empty box had a tefach of airspace. You put a lid over it, and that lid is considered like, wow, you just made a tent. So you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. Interestingly, if you do it in reverse order and you hold that wood there and then you slide the box under the wood, that's not considered making a tent because it's only called making a tent when you tent over something. But if the wood was just being held there in midair and a box went under it, that would be considered fine. Other solution to this situation is you could put the box upside down and then put the lid on top of that box, and now you haven't created a tent because there's no airspace between the tent and the box. Lastly, on this matter, a tent could be considered from the side too. When you pull out a folding wall, those room dividers, when you pull out that folding wall, that's meant to go in and out. The rabbis didn't decree on that type of situation, so go ahead and pull out the folding wall on Shabbos or Yom Tov. That's going to be considered fine. Thanks for logging on. Log on again tomorrow for more. Bye-bye.